Hi folks, this is all the fruit at the misty Nordic fjord. Sky-high cliffs, well, behind the construction site. Icy mountains, the valley scraped out of the bedrock by giant glaciers. Ice-cold water run off from snowy peaks that never see the warmth of spring. Dragon boats on the water. Yeah, right now those are just modern boats, but I swear they are dragon boats here. Well, this is basically the last place where you would expect a lemon cultivation area. And not just a modern lemon cultivation area, maybe fueled by Norwegian oil or Icelandic volcanoes or Swedish industry. No, this area has been the supplier of the life-saving fruits for the countries in the north of Europe for 800 years. Meet Lago di Garda, the Mediterranean of the north. Just don't go fishing here without a license, or you're gonna get a visit by the nice cops. We are here not in Scandinavia, despite the fact that yes, this is basically a fjord carved out by ancient glaciers. Yes, the water is ice cold even in July because it's coming right from the snowy mountains. Yes, there are giant cliffs, some of the most spectacular in all of Europe behind this town. Yes, they are the dragon boat-like boats of the Venetian doges on this sea. Lago di Garda is not situated in northern Europe, but it's situated in the Alps mountains. And despite that, if you look around, olives, palms, cypresses, evergreen plants, this is a crazy microclimate. You might think, well, yeah, we are in Italy, the Mediterranean is just south of here. Nope, just south of here is the Po Flat, an area with scorching summers but ice-cold winters, completely open to the cold Siberian winds coming from the east. This here is in Subria. This here is an area nestled in the foothills of the Alps, protected by the high mountains from three sides. Well, protected by the narrowness from the cold winds, even from the south. And the lake, yeah, it might cool down the area a lot in summer because of the glacial runoff, but in winter it warms it up. A perfect climate which creates more or less a Atlantic subtropical climate in the western alpine lakes like Lago Maggiore and Lago di Como, but here in Lago di Garda, or around Lago di Garda, it creates basically a Mediterranean climate, which is quite befitting since this area is settled by Italians who like Mediterranean climate. And actually for the last 200 years people have introduced countless subtropical and Mediterranean ornamentals here. But even since the Middle Ages, they have had cultivated the lemons here, not so much to eat them themselves, not so much for consumption in Italy, but as I said, as a lifesaver for Nordic countries. It's really crazy, everything looks so Italian, and we are in Italy. Well, let's not forget that here the Italians in World War I tried to conquer the Alps. If you think the Western Front was a useless, senseless massacre, here near Lago di Garda for 4 years the Italians were storming against a 2,000 meter high wall of the Alps, while the Austrians were sitting on top and shooting down on them. So many young people died here for nothing. Ah well, at the end the Italians snagged a part of Austria and inherited 100 years of pro-German terrorism in Italy because, yeah, you want an empire, you gotta deal with independence movements. But long before that time, a unique and never again seen or never seen anywhere else in the world agricultural industry emerged here. See this building in the background? Almost looks like a high-rise. This is one of the so-called medieval cathedrals of fruit cultivation of the Garda Lake, and it's one of the small ones too. Well, let me tell you how those things came to be while you are watching the beautiful scenery around here. Basically, since time immemorial, people have noticed that you need to eat fruit and veg every day. So the stuff your mama tells you is true. And actually they had a big problem. For example, in old times, sailors couldn't get fruit and veg every day. And so the city of Amalfi in southern Italy, they started ruling the Mediterranean with their fleet. Why? Because they had fruits. I mean, every Italian city had a lot of ships back then, especially the coastal cities. But did they have fruits? No. The city of Amalfi ruled the Mediterranean, and it made the first Western European sea code or sailor code, basically a law for the sea. Amalfi had 1,000 ships, so whatever they said was law. And it was law to grow lemons and to have lemons on every ship. The sailors of every ship had the right to have lemons. Later the English converted this. Well, later the English started liking the Amalfi lemons a lot, and later when they didn't like Italy so much anymore, they changed to limes. That's why the British are called limeys. And so scurvy, a disease which attacks you if you don't eat enough fruits, was basically banned from Mediterranean and later British ships. However, what do you do if you are living in Germany or Russia or some other Nordic country? Well, in the Mediterranean, ships sailing from the Mediterranean, in the Middle Ages, ships sailing from the Mediterranean around Spain, through the Atlantic, through the stormy Sea of Biscaya, through the violent North Sea, into the frozen over Baltics. Nah, mate, it's not gonna happen. The bravest captains would maybe go in summer, but nobody would go in winter. And transporting all those things on the back of mules and donkeys from southern Italy to Russia in winter, good luck. But wait, we have this lake in northern Italy. It's basically just a very short trip away from some of the important capitals of the north, like Vienna and Budapest, and also within reachable distance of St. Petersburg or Berlin or other important capitals. Why not grow lemons here? We have been growing olives here probably since Roman times. Well, in the Middle Ages it was a little bit too cold here for lemons. But still, imagine some Nordic lord or king. He would say, yeah, I have a giant palace. And other lords and kings would say, yeah, but do you have fruit? I have a huge army. But do you have fruit? I have a mountain of gold. But do you have fruit? I have millions of serfs. But do you have fruit? Because without fruit, your life is literally worth nothing. Even if you are a king or a lord or have all the money and serfs and armies in the world, you don't get fruits in winter, you die. Well, in the north, poor people would make tea from pine needles and other things they could dig out from the snow in winter, but it was not the same. And scurvy was a big problem in Central and Northern Europe in the Middle Ages. And so, yeah, the Franciscan monks, some say the Catholic Church is against science, but in the Middle Ages they were the forerunners of science in all of Europe. The Franciscan monks bought, or got donated, as a church you don't buy, you get stuff for free, got donated an island and some other land here in Lake Garda. And they introduced citruses from the south. And I notice up here, yeah, it's called Mediterranean. You can grow olives with some effort, but citruses, it's really hard. You cannot grow them outdoors. So they developed the greenhouse. This is not a modern invention. This is a medieval invention. Right here in this area. Well, and this was an incredible feat of engineering. I mean, back then most people were living in little straw huts or wooden cabins, but you would build those here. They literally called them the cathedrals of fruit cultivation. Look at that. You have to build a high impenetrable wall from the north. Better also build one from the south to protect from winds. You have to build everything against the steep mountain slope, which usually is on the north or northwest, because only the western bank of the Lago di Garda was fit for lemon cultivation. So the west bank means the water is in the east and the mountains are in the west. Okay, then you had basically the perfect microclimate. Heat rising from the sea, heat getting reflected by the walls, heat getting basically being prevented from rising by the structure of the area. You also need a little creek because there are drought periods here around Lago di Garda, and you don't want your lemons, which are basically worth their weight in gold, to suffer from the drought. But it is still not enough because of the icy winters of the Alps. This might be one of the least icy places in the Alps, but it's still icy enough. So what do? You build those pillars. Usually they were single stone shards. In this case they are pillars made of masonry, stone masonry. Then you put a wooden construction around them, and then you put wooden planks on top of this wooden construction in winter, and you leave a couple windows for the lemons to have light in winter. So you prevent this stuff from freezing in winter. And during warm winter days you can open some of the south-facing planks, let the sunlight and the heat in, then in the evening you close them again. Yeah, but sometimes even this wasn't enough, so then they would light fires inside those medieval greenhouses. This was the traditional way of heating a greenhouse. You just put a couple pieces of wood on the ground and set them on fire. Of course, quite dangerous when you are in a house built of basically spruce planks. I'm waiting here for my beautiful but camera-shy assistant. That's why for now I'm still talking outside of this greenhouse. Here avete Limonaia, la Malora. Limonaia is are those traditional greenhouses, and this one is from the 16th century. We have the first clear records of lemon cultivation in greenhouses here in the 16th century, but already from the 14th century we have reports of lemons here. So we guess that in the 16th century those greenhouses were already completely developed and had been developed during the previous centuries. And so around here they would grow the lemons in those medieval greenhouses, which were basically high-tech feats of engineering back then. Imagine first you Buongiorno. Just met the wonderful, super friendly owner of the Limonaia. Well, if you look at this, well, here is even a mill, which was usually used to grind the corn, or in this case, probably more often also the chestnuts, which were used as a replacement of wheat. But here, if you look at those massive constructions, this is from the 16th century. Back at this time, only churches, monasteries, palaces, or the houses of super rich merchants were built in that way. That's why they call those things cathedrals of fruit cultivation. Imagine They had just about 40 hectares of those at Lago di Garda, but they supported a giant industry and a big part of the local population. Imagine laborers to carve this out of the barren rock. Then boat people who often brought the soil from the other side. Then stonemasons, really good stonemasons to build all this. Remember, folks, we are talking about medieval times and Renaissance times here. A lot of lumberjacks to cut down the wood for the constructions. Making planks in medieval times was high-tech. Most of Europe didn't even know saws by this time. Making a plank back there. And maybe craziest of all, the glass. Have you heard of Murano glass? This Italian glass worth its weight in gold and much more. As a farmer, buying even one pane of glass, this was an immense investment back then. They said a big nail industry existed here to provide the countless nails for all this. Of course, you also had to ship or raft the timber down the timber from the mountains for heating the stuff in winter. And of course you had to have all those horses and mules and so on to bring the stuff over the Alps. An incredibly dangerous feat because you had to do this as early in the spring as possible. During the winter, people in the north, they would have apples and a couple things, but in spring they would run out of this and they would start dying and dying quickly. And no matter if you had a ton of gold and a ton of diamonds, if you didn't have lemons, you died in spring. So those people would cross the snowy Alps with their horse and mule caravans, going into the north, into Germany, Austria, and then continuing through the still snowy Nordic areas of Europe, all the way into Russia, into St. Petersburg, Moscow and Novgorod, all the way into Sweden and Finland. They produced only a very limited amount of lemons here, but all of Northern Europe waited for those. By the way, the local variety here, it's a local alpine variety. There are a lot of those monstrous lemons which look a lot like Buddha's hand. In southern groves, in southern lemon groves, those are very rare. I've only seen them once or twice, but here they are common. Look at that one, such monstrous lemon here. They are dropping all the little undeveloped fruits. There I see the next one, right next to this thing. I forgot the name of the local variety. I'll tell it to you in a moment. Here, another slightly monstrous lemon. So this is quite typical for those lemons around here. The lemon trees were grown very tall, sometimes 10-12 meters. That's extremely tall for a lemon tree. But of course, since you had all those wooden beams and supports and also those big wooden pillars, you were able to grow them that high. Of course, you had to prune the lemon several times. Every year you had to fertilize them with mature manure or compost. And you had to water them regularly because if you are having such a high intense industry and such a high investment industry, a couple months of drought, you don't want them to stop your production. Here is one of the water channels. That's why it was important. Those creeks coming down from the Alps were very important. Here is a narrow water channel. Here is this little sandbag. This is a very traditional way. You know, you want the water to go here, you put the sandbag here. You don't want the water to go here, you put the sandbag here. Also, they say usually at the bottom of those troughs, they would have a bundle of twigs to stop the water from carving out a hole here. Incredibly beautiful lemon groves. And yeah, they were feeding 40 hectares. Those were feeding probably thousands of people, keeping thousands of people in bread and butter here at Lago di Garda, and also saving hundreds of thousands or millions of people from a horrible death by scurvy all through Germany, Russia and other countries. Of course, if you were a king, a lord or a rich merchant, the peasants, they can die or drink pine needle tea. Here, by the way, the capers from the Mediterranean are growing here, a very typical Mediterranean spice. Well, I'm always talking about lemons, but you might have noticed there are a couple other plants here. Interestingly, I never had the mandarin. I think this is a mandarin. Never had the mandarin mentioned in any literature. The mandarin is actually quite a frost-hardy citrus. So they would grow lemons here mostly for export. Well, only the top quality, because carrying something over the Alps on a mule's back, you want to get your money's worth. You cannot bring inferior fruits there. Then they had a couple oranges, which were mostly for local consumption. Funny why didn't they export them? They also had the so-called bitter orange, which they could even grow outside of those greenhouses. It's not bitter, it's sour. Why didn't they bring it to the north? It's just like a lemon, and it's easier to cultivate. But they would usually use it just as a rootstock, because those lemons were usually not, well, were not seedling lemons, but a local variety, a local clone, and they were grafted on top of those so-called bitter oranges. And of course, very important, they had citrons, the sacred etrog citron of the Jews, probably the first citrus fruit to ever come to the Western world, to the Mediterranean. So here around Lago di Garda, they were also growing those sacred citrons for the Jewish communities of the wealthy cities in northern Italy. Those cities were already super wealthy in the Middle Ages. That's the area at the time where the modern banking system got developed. In the Middle Ages, in northern Italy, in the cities. And actually, they had all the banking system with all this, online money, let's say it, only that back then it was on paper. Long before they were even using coins. They kind of stopped using coin stuff after the Roman Empire collapsed, and then in the Middle Ages, first they started using paper and deeds and wills and stocks and things like that. All those things we have online now, they had them on paper. And after some time they also started minting coins. But a lot of those bankers were Jews, and those Jews would pay prime money for the sacred citron. All those planks and stuff you would store here in those structures in summer, because of course, as I said, planks were high-tech, very expensive, so were nails. Glass was even more expensive. Okay, but glass doesn't degrade in water. But you had to protect those things in summer so that they didn't rot in the summer rains. So you see here in those skyscraper-like structures here, the Italians were very good at building skyscrapers even in the Middle Ages. The skyscraper is another thing invented in Italy in the Middle Ages. If you were posh, you built a tower up to 100 meters. And those towers here were built to house those posh planks and posh nails and posh glass. Although I think in the Middle Ages, I don't think they had glass for this. Probably they would use pergament or something like leather, which was a little bit translucent, or just open the stuff during winter, during the day, remove a couple planks during the day, and return them in the evening. Also, it's very important that we are here on the western shore, because here you would get the first sunlight, ex oriente lux. The light comes from the east. That's why the light first shines into the west, because the eastern shore is in the shade. The morning is the coldest. The early morning is the coldest part of the day. So here, the coldest part of the day would end very quickly. On the other shore, you could have ice for a couple more hours. Of course, here it would get cold quite early in the evening compared to the other shore, but that's not as bad, because in the evening it's not as cold as in the morning. That's why only the west coast, only those east-facing slopes, yes, the east-facing slopes on the west coast were the citron cultivation. Here you can see how intricate We still don't know how a lot of those things were financed. With others, we know financed with a lot of money, because a normal farmer, those things are really tiny, like a farming family would work. Well, here this one is just 3 tiny terraces, but still, to finance all the structures for this is an incredible investment for a medieval peasant. In some cases, the roofs made of planks would be left during colder parts of the year, even when the greenhouse was open, so that the heat coming up from there would basically not be able to escape further up the mountain. Here they had a very intricate way of basically transporting the heat and capturing the heat, and also a very intricate way of transporting and distributing the water. Those were basically the oldest zone pushers. Zone pushers is a term which a lot of people nowadays use to plant southern plants in more Nordic areas. Those were some of the first zone pushers. They pushed lemon cultivation well beyond any imaginable limits. They had greenhouses along a fjord in the Alps in the Middle Ages, and they were transporting those fruits and providing the capitals of the north, the wealthy elites of the north, with those fruits. It's so incredible. Okay, so I read the brochure, a couple interesting things. The local lemon variety is called Modernina. It's especially adapted to the cold climate here, and also to the low light levels in winter. Remember, glass was super expensive, almost as expensive as gold in some cases, or probably rather like silver. So the fewer windows, the better. Also, you had to balance the light and the heat. If you don't have a lot of heat in winter, it's better not to have too much light, and vice versa. Later, when the citrus cultivation was transferred to Central and Northern Europe for the gardens of the posh lords, they would often overheat the plants in the greenhouses made completely of wood without windows, and get a lot of diseases in winter, because too much heat and not enough light in winter is very detrimental to the plants. Also, I learned that the mill here was an olive mill. Here we have an old olive tree. It's probably well over 100 years old. And also I learned that yes, the citrons were really pricey, basically worth their weight in gold. And the Jewish rabbis, they would come here from far and wide, from the cities of northern Italy, to choose the perfect, the best citron fruit without any blemishes for their rituals. So what happened to those hundreds of cathedrals of lemon cultivation? Well, until the 18th century everything went well, and actually the 17th and 18th century were the peak of the citrus cultivation around here. Here you see a couple mandarins. Or wait, those are definitely mandarins, but those I think could also be some mandarins or sweet oranges. Well, the lemons from here would fetch a higher price in Northern Europe, even if those people could have lemons from southern Italy or Spain. Those lemons are less sour. Rich people liked sweet things, they didn't like sour things. So those lemons are less sour. They have a thinner skin. Imagine everything is being carried on the backs of horses and mules over the highest mountains in Europe. You don't want excess weight. Although the skin was also used, of course, for perfumes and essential oils and other things in the north, but still, it was the Jews saving the rich lords to join the peasants in the cemeteries. It seems that they were healthier than the ones from the south, but how did they measure that back then? Thinner skin, but still better for transport. Nowadays they say that those things here, the lemons also have more fibers and so on. They seem to be superior in every case. Also, of course, they were fresher than the South Italian lemons, so they were more favored here in the north than the South Italian lemons. But then the 19th century was not very was not very favorable for the lemons. First, a big disease struck them. Then, Italy got unified. Those lemons here were protected quite well by all the borders and taxes and tolls between the small Italian states. But then Italy got unified and fruits from the south could come from the north without any inhibitions. Then, well, the steamboat, those steamboats could go within very few weeks or even days from the Mediterranean to places like Germany or Russia. So you didn't need to bring those lemons in horse caravans over the Alps. Yeah, then well, at some time the Brits stopped buying Italian lemons, so all those big producing areas from the south, they had to orient themselves to somewhere else, and they made even more competition for the Nordic areas. Look here, another monstrous lemon, another one. So this is very common in this variety. And then basically the final blow was World War I, sorry. When I told you that the Italians were running against the 2,000-meter wall of the Alps, I think in 4 years they advanced like 100 meters. This is like on the Eastern Front at least there were advances of a couple 100 meters here and then. Here in 4 years they advanced just 100 meters. But of course, in the cold, icy alpine winters, the soldiers needed shelters, they needed material for construction. So all those planks and beams were confiscated, and this was basically the final blow to the citrus industry here in Lago di Garda. Some people say, why didn't they start? They already had those greenhouses. In the 20th century, Italy developed a big flower production. Oh, here, by the way, you can see how the shore looked. See all the pillars of the old greenhouses. This is probably a photo that's over 100 years old. Well, some people say, why didn't they start flower production for the big North Italian cities? Liguria developed the biggest flower industry in Europe and basically in the world in the late 19th and early 20th century, where somehow they didn't. I saw 1 or 2 flower greenhouses now, but it's not a big thing like in Liguria. And then, yeah, in the 30s, in the 1930s, tourism started developing here. Before that, they had no road. All those villages were connected just by boats and not by motorboats. The tourists started coming, farmers started selling them the few remaining lemons, and then towards the end of the 20th century, a lot of, well, very few of those greenhouses got restored, just for, yeah, to save an old agricultural industry here, a unique, one of the most spectacular ones I've seen anywhere in the world. And there's maybe a dozen of restored Limonaia or lemon greenhouses along the Lago di Garda, and you can see the remnants of many dozens others when you travel along the road. If you see such pillars, they are basically the remnants of such a greenhouse. Even if you see such walls with supports for the wooden beams, they are the remnants of a greenhouse. Of course, now we have climate change, so those traditional Limonaia, they are still being covered with planks in winter, but they say for decades they have never lit a fire here because it's not that cold anymore. Also, a lot of people start cultivating lemons in the old Limonaia without any planks, because, yeah, the walls, the location and the walls and the construction of the Limonaia already provides a lot of protection. So the citruses still grow quite well here, even without this labor-intensive wooden construction. They sometimes even plant them in places which are not as favorable nowadays, but they still survive without big problems because of the climate change. So yeah, citrus cultivation is becoming quite popular. Look, for example, down there, this garden. Okay, the citruses grow right at the water's edge, but they are not protected. Okay, they are protected by this big wall from the north, but they are not protected as well as the citruses here, and they are still growing well. So in the medieval times, and especially during the Little Ice Age, in the 17th and 18th and early 19th century, when this industry was most developed. This was called the Little Ice Age in Europe. We had very, very cold decades and centuries at this time. Back then, the planks and the fires inside the greenhouses were incredibly important. But now, yeah, the citrus cultivation has spread a lot. And, okay, somebody wants my attention. I think my partner is here. Here, the impressive constructions from the other side. Saying it once again, in the same time, most peasants around here were living in simple huts. Constructing something like this for fruits, well, they really got their money's worth. Here the view of the Limonaia from the top. A beautiful view from the highest terrace. The construction from above. The ancient oil mill from above. Here the construction from the same level. Here they left 5 of the planks to show you how this looks in winter. Here again the high rise where they put the planks in winter. And here the highest terrace. Here on the other side you see an abandoned Limonaia. Well, abandoned. They are not using it for lemons, but they are cultivating olives because a Mediterranean climate so far north in the Alps is really worth a lot. So they are trying not to waste even a single square inch of this blessed land. Here the lemons have been peeled for limoncello. Here is one of those old baskets. I know those were used a lot for grapes, but I guess around here they also use them for olives and lemons. Here you see those leather bags.
Have you €5 or?
I think no. I think. Okay. You have. Grazie molto. Okay. So here are the baskets. I'm in a hurry now because we have to catch the bus. Here they have the baskets they used to collect the grapes and the olives, and here the traditional tools. Today we're gonna visit another Limonaia. Maybe there I can explain the traditional stuff a little bit better. Here I'm trying the high quality liqueurs they made. Here they call them limoncino, not limoncello like they call them in Amalfi. And first I tried a standard one made from ripe lemons, but this one, he said, is a bit bitter because this is made from unripe lemons. Yeah, you can taste the unripe. I wouldn't say it's bitter, but you can taste the green lemon taste here. It's different from the ripe lemon taste. And here you can see the terrace without the lemons in here. Just the construction. I guess maybe in winter they close it so that they have an enclosed space here for the people to sit.